well. Epic Tavern, the game, from HyperKinetic Studios, also had a comic book to go with it. And that's the asset and everything we're kind of focusing this conversation around, and how they used gamification within this asset. So I just wanted to give that top context there, because I think it provides a good frame for leading us into this discussion. So to kick off our question here, I want to go back to talking a little bit about gamification, because at the core, this is essentially what everything's about regarding the comic, regarding the game. And it's something that I would say a lot of developers may like to strive for, but it can become a little bit too ambitious sometimes. What would you say is a good place for developers to start if they want to keep their audience engaged through gamification?
Yeah, well, there are different, very, very different types of gamification. And I think it mostly comes down to intent, at least from the way I look at it. Gamifying a process to extract additional money from the audience is a very different thing than gamifying a process to add value to the player experience.
Yep.
Players know the difference, and if you're only doing the former, that's apt to rub them the wrong way. So our approach was always to entirely focus on adding value to the player experience by making the comic more interactive. And one of the ways we did that was we built this elaborate puzzle into the game and comic that requires both of them to solve. So you can follow a series of clues from the comic into the game that tells you where to look in the comic for the next clues, that tells you what to do in the game next to unlock a secret ending to the Flaming Gate storyline. And, I'm old enough to remember Sword Quest on the Atari, which was this game and companion comic with like a real world puzzle that, you had to find the item, and it was actually hidden. And as best we can tell, that hasn't been done since the Atari. I haven't been able to find any other examples of a comic game crossover puzzle, which seems really weird because it's this cool concept that sort of got left behind for no apparent reason. So we're bringing it back. But my big problem with Sword Quest is that, and that I was dead set on avoiding with ours, is that neither the game nor the comic for Sword Quest was the slightest bit enjoyable on its own. It was just a vessel for the puzzle. Yep. They made no effort to be enjoyed, to stand alone. The game was terrible. The comic was, super bare bones and just there to, give you the ciphers you need to solve and stuff. And I really wanted to avoid that. So the way I did it is to ensure that I didn't stumble into that trap, was that I didn't even design our puzzle until after the entire issue was written and drawn.
Okay.
Then I built it in out of existing pieces so that I, could head off the temptation to shoehorn something in that, is only there for puzzle reasons.
Yeah. I want to say, too, that I really like how you let in that because with saying, reasons for like gamification, especially in the context of, like I mentioned earlier, as an asset, but boiling it down to intent and value. So even if some things may come off, to put in the more general sense, if they may come off too ambitious, if you look at those two things, how am I want to do this, but I don't want it to be ambitious or whatever, or get out of hand. What's a good way to kind of like set my framework, and approaching it from what you said, intent and value perspective is what I would recommend too, is definitely the way to go. Because once you get into like money aspects and all those other things, like, oh, it's something else we can create revenue from and everything else, that sounds great. But like you said, players are savvy. They'll pick up on that stuff. So I love that you led in with that aspect.
Yeah, and it's a question of, are you giving something to the player through your gamification, or are you extracting something from them?
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely good way to look at it. Well, thank you for kicking that off. And I want to kind of now go into kind of like the strategy of this, because again, it's pretty interesting. When you guys were looking at, different ways to market Epic Tavern, how did the idea for creating the comic for the game come about? Now, you mentioned about, I'm sorry, I forget the title, but the Atari game with the comic, but was there anything else out? Sword Quest, thank you. Was there anything outside of Sword Quest that kind of gave you that idea, outside of the idea of it, okay, no one's ever done this before, but what other factors came into play?
It was really a question of just being open to opportunities that presented themselves. Mm-hmm. Because, I've been making comics on the side for years. And I edit a bunch of comics through the Black Caravan imprint of Scout Comics, which is like this imprint that focuses on horror, sci-fi, and fantasy. And I had this kind of standing distribution offer from them, as well as a front row seat to see how their books were performing on the market. So I was confident that we could at least make back, our investment. So I brought the idea to HyperKinetic to adapt Epic Tavern into a comic. And, after a bit of back and forth and number crunching, they gave me the green light to, kind of assemble a team and make it happen. So it wasn't a thing that we were organically looking to do or looking to do from the start. It was just that while working with Black Caravan, I saw an opportunity space. So I brought it to my studio, and, they're flexible and savvy enough to be open to new unorthodox ideas, and they were all in.
That's cool. And I like too how it was more from, because I know sometimes like people may come up with ideas similar to a comic or some other medium to kind of use as a means to, whether it's creating awareness or providing value or whatever the case may be. They might look at it just from, maybe those standpoints or not necessarily think about the other aspects of it. But you're looking at it from not just a creative standpoint in terms of creatively doing something different outside of the norm, but you're also looking at, probably what other opportunities existed, and based off of your background and other things, those things started to kind of present themselves. So probably a good thing to look at it was there too. You guys didn't simply just, or you didn't come out and just pitch this out of the blue. The opportunities have presented themselves. So maybe it's a good thing to take away in terms of, well, see what like opportunities present themselves before just saying, wow, this sounds awesome, let's do it.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I had been working on Epic Tavern full time for 4 years before I pitched the comic.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just that it's a cool idea, we should find a way to make it work. It's that I liked the idea years ago, and I was just watching and waiting for, an opportunity that I could be fully confident I could go to the company with this and have it be successful. And it took, almost 4 years for that opportunity to come up. And it was because I was editing through Black Caravan and,
yep.
Just the opportunity space presented itself.
Nice. Now, outside of the opportunities and everything else from that perspective, to me, it seems like the player base for Epic Tavern definitely had some overlap, or at least some affinity with the audiences that are, interested in comics. And I'm just curious, what was the process like to determine if this was the case, if there was that overlap in audiences between the game and the comic?
Yeah, that's actually an interesting question. We're certainly hoping that's the case, but our approach was actually to not rely on it.
Okay.
And instead create a comic that could succeed on its own. So that someone who doesn't play video games and has never even heard of Epic Tavern could still really enjoy the comic. We didn't want it to just be an extension of the game that's only enjoyable to players of the game. And I was confident that with the setting we had and the stories we had, that we could make a comic that could be entirely successful on its own, even without the game tie-in. So I always treated it as less of a straight adaptation and more of a comic set into the story world of Epic Tavern. And I think that's a key distinction. Here's how I look at it. If I'm walking through a comic book shop and I see a Warhammer comic on the shelf, if I don't play Warhammer, my eyes just keep moving. My eyes just continue on to the next book. I've just mentally categorized that at a glance as not for me, So we didn't want to tether the comic and the game too tightly together, and in the process alienate the vast majority of potential readers who don't play our indie game. So the key was, obviously, we hope there's overlap, and there definitely seems to be overlap. There's been a lot of interest from our players about the game, but we wanted to make sure that we weren't dependent on that, and that the comic was its own thing.
Yeah, and again, this kind of goes back to what we were talking about a moment ago, whereas like, talking about the opportunities and such, but also I think it's good approaching it from the way you did, because having having that two separate essentially entities and being dependent on them on their own, I think really helps focus on providing that much more value. Again, because
Yes.
and I love how you structured everything based around. One more time, and I will remember the Atari game you mentioned.
Sword Quest.
Thank you, Sword Quest. Because again, that was really a sticking point to not do that. And again, it still comes down to value and intent, because even without knowing for sure if those audiences overlapped or whatever, well, the comic, and I'm sure possibly the game to some extent, can serve as a means to kind of like cross promote. That really wasn't the focus. It was just still providing a single entity experience that provides great value, and then also has the ability to cross promote, not leading with the cross promotion now.
Yes, because when you lead with cross promotion, you alienate anybody who doesn't care about the game.
Right.
That's really the thing.
Or vice versa.
Enough, yes, exactly. Yeah. And unfortunately, we were low enough risk that we didn't have to face a tremendous amount of pressure.
Yep.
We were coming out with through a comic imprint that's already successful, that has a fan base. There are people who buy all the Black Caravan books. So we were in a situation where, I knew we were going to succeed to some degree. It was just a question of, maybe we come up $1,000 short, maybe we make a few thousand on it, but it wasn't going to be a big amount of money one way or another.
Yep.
So we didn't have to compromise the quality of the comic to try and extract every bit of promotional value out of it. That was never our approach.
Yeah. No, and yeah, definitely a good one to go, because again, it goes back to the whole intent and value aspect.
Right.
So, I obviously at the beginning of this project and everything, the game was the main focus, and obviously, as you shared with us already, the game and the comic had to be treated as separate projects. And I was just curious, because again, I'm trying to speak to anybody who's looking to possibly do something like this in the future or whatever. What type of resources were devoted to each project? And did they have like separate marketing plans, campaigns, and things like that?
Yeah. HyperKinetic gave me free reign to basically assemble a team and basically make the comic as a side project. They provided valuable feedback on the script and concept art and a budget, obviously, which helps. But the creative decisions, were mine to make. For better or worse, this is always going to be my baby, and I knew that going in. And that leads to a tremendous amount of, self-applied pressure, to reward their trust and make a great comic, which, fortunately now we've done. And man, we got this sent off to press yesterday, and I could not love this issue more. It is just top to bottom the highest quality execution that has ever existed of one of my stories. It's just, I'm madly in love with it. I can't wait till we can share it with everyone. So what we did is I basically, we didn't want to take any studio resources because we didn't want to slow down development of the game on anything. So I just kind of built everything on the side and kind of put together a team of people that either I've worked with before or I knew through the comic book world. The first one was Steve Mardo, who's our main artist, and he's phenomenal. I mean, if you look up Tales from the FCU, just Google it, look up some of the images there. His artwork is just amazing, and his character designs are so good, which is super important for a fantasy story. And Steve had somehow never really landed a book that could fully showcase his talents. So this is kind of a win-win for him. He'd been looking for a good opportunity that had some real meat to sink his teeth into. And, and Black Caravan's publisher, Joe Schmalke, had raved about Martin to me. He said, this guy's great. You should really look at him. and he kind of